My ex-wife married a cardiologist. I married the woman who owns the hospital. My name is Franz Webb. I restore instruments for a living, specifically stringed instruments, violins, cellos, the occasional double bass that somebody's grandmother left in an attic for 40 years. I work out of a small shop in Asheville. The shop is on a side street, ground floor of an old building. I've been doing it for 16 years. There are maybe 200 people in the country who do what I do at the level I do it. Her name was Diane. We were married for 6 years. She was a pharmaceutical sales rep, which meant she drove a company car, wore good clothes, and spent her working life in rooms with doctors who made $300,000 a year minimum. At first, everything was okay. I was naive enough to think love could hold, but comfortable is a ceiling when the people around you are wealthy. And comfortable starts to look like a change. She started coming home late, started having dinners with colleagues that ran long, started mentioning a name, Dr. Harlan, Raymond Harlan, cardiologist, regularly in a way that had stopped being casual somewhere. I knew there was a gut feeling where this was going, but I hoped that we are that couple. And my love is that unique outlier. I was delusional. She asked for a divorce on a Tuesday in February. I said, okay. She looked surprised that I said, okay. It was just the honest answer because I was waiting for it and was just hoping that my suspicions were wrong. The shop kept me alive. I don't mean financially, I mean the other kind of alive. There's something about restoration work that suits a specific kind of grief. You take something broken and you find out what it needs and you give it back. The work is true. At the end of it, something that was silent makes sound again. The instrument came in on a Wednesday, 14 months after the divorce. Dropped off by a woman who was a personal assistant. She said her employer had been traveling internationally and had been told by a dealer in London that I was the right person for it. I unwrapped it. It was a Guarneri. Not a copy, not a later instrument in the Guarneri style, an actual Del Gesù made in Cremona circa 1740 with the asymmetrical F-holes and the amber red varnish and the particular arching that you recognize if you have spent enough years with your hands on violins to know what you are looking at. I set it down on the bench very carefully. There were maybe 250 authenticated Del Gesù instruments in existence. The soloists who played them today were household names in classical music. It was priceless in terms of money and in terms of artistic value. I called the assistant back and said I needed to speak with the owner directly before I touched it. She called me that evening. Her name was Nora Voss. The voice was direct, unhurried, European accented in a way I couldn't immediately place. Later, I learned German mother, American father, grew up between Munich and Connecticut. She said she'd been told I was the best restorer on the East Coast for instruments of this period, and she needed the work done properly, and money was not the constraint. I said I understood, and before I agreed to take it, I had some questions about provenance and condition history. She answered all of them with documentation. She said she'd be in Asheville in 6 weeks to check progress. I said that was fine. I went back to the bench and sat with the instrument for a long time without touching it. Just looked at it, a 300-year-old object that had survived everything the world had done, wars, revolutions, the casual brutality of people who didn't understand what they had, still here. Nora Voss arrived on a Thursday afternoon 6 weeks later. I'd expected someone who moved through the world with the specific performance of wealth, the outfit, the energy that precedes itself. What walked into my shop was a normal woman in dark trousers and a plain coat who looked at the bench before she looked at me, which immediately told me something important. She was 41. I was 38. She had a foundation that funded music education in underserved schools across 3 countries. She picked up the instrument correctly without being told and looked at the work I'd done on the top seam and the varnish retouching along the treble side. She said, "You matched the varnish." I said I'd been working on the color for 3 weeks before I touched the instrument. Mixed 17 test batches. She looked up. 17. I said the original varnish had an unusual red amber in it that shifts in a different light. I wasn't going to put something next to it that didn't shift the same way. She looked back at the instrument for a long moment. She said, "The last person who worked on this charged me 4 times what you're charging, and I could see his retouching from across the room." I said I couldn't speak to what anyone else did. She set the instrument down carefully and looked at me in a way that was direct without being aggressive. She said, "Can I hear it? I picked it up. I'm not a performing musician. My playing is functional, a restorer's playing, enough to assess the instrument's voice, but I put the bow to the strings and played a slow open G, and the sound that came out of that room was, I don't have a word for it. It was like the room got larger, a 300-year-old voice that had been sleeping and was now awake. Nora stood completely still with her arms at her sides. When I stopped, she said very quietly, 'There it is.' She stayed 2 hours while her whole entourage stood outside my shop. Her assistant, her security. People started to wonder if I was in some trouble or a celebrity visit. She looked at my other work on the bench, asked technical questions I didn't expect her to know to ask, and listened to the answers with the attention of someone who actually wanted to understand. Before she left, she asked if I'd like to have dinner. Straightforward. I said yes. I assumed it was more about work, but it turned out to be more. There's a particular thing that happens when someone sees your work, really sees it, understands what it cost in patience and skill and time, not valuable in the way art is valuable at auction. Nora asked on our 3rd evening together to walk her through how I learned to match varnish. Not a small talk. She actually wanted to know. I talked for 20 minutes and she didn't look at her phone once. I kept waiting for the part where it became complicated, the part where the money showed up as a problem between us, either her discomfort at the gap or my own. It never arrived. She didn't flatten the difference or pretend it wasn't there. She just didn't make it. The point. We got engaged on a Sunday in October. No event, no performance. I had a ring I'd had made by a jeweler in Asheville, a friend of mine who'd set a small piece of the spruce I'd removed from the Guarneri restoration, a fragment saved in resin, and incorporated it into the band. Nora held it for a long time before she put it on. We were married 11 weeks later in a small ceremony in Asheville with her father and my mother, who cried. Now, the gala was Nora's Foundation's annual fundraiser held at a restored estate outside Asheville that the foundation used for events, the kind of evening that attracted the serious donors and serious musicians. A string quartet in the entrance hall, catering that cost more than my monthly mortgage had, people in the room whose names I recognized from occasional news headlines. We were standing near the far end of the main room when I saw her. Diane came in on Raymond Harlan's arm. At that point in time, I didn't know the hospital Raymond worked at was owned by a trust and some private equity company. Basically, what I mean to say is that the hospital belonged to Nora. The fact I came to know that night. He looked the same, tall, confident. Diane was in a gown, hair up, the whole architecture of a woman who had spent considerable time preparing for this room. She saw me approximately 30 seconds after I saw her. The processing took a moment. The suit. The room I was standing in, the ease with which I was standing in it. Then her eyes moved to Nora beside me, and I saw her place the face. Nora was not unknown in these circles. Her foundation's work was visible, and her name was on the program, and the processing continued. She said something to Raymond. He looked over. His expression went through something I won't try to name. They came over, because of course they did. Raymond extended a hand and said, "It's a small world." I shook it and agreed. He looked at Nora and introduced himself with specific energy and said it was an honor working in her hospital, and she has done a fabulous job. She received it pleasantly, but Diane was not pleasant. I could see it in her eyes. Diane said, "Franz, you look wonderful." I said, "Thank you, Diane. You as well." She started babbling about, foundation, about me, but in reality, she wanted to know what my relationship was with Nora. I said she is my wife. Raymond said something congratulatory that didn't reach his eyes. So Diane said very carefully, "Your wife, my wife," I confirmed. Nora said, "It's nice to meet you. Franz has mentioned you." Diane looked at her. trying to read the temperature of that sentence. Has he? He mentioned you left during a difficult period. He wasn't unkind about it. She said it with a smile that was entirely genuine, which somehow made it worse. Diane's jaw moved slightly. Then she pivoted. I watched her do it, watched the decision get made, and she said, with the air of someone doing a reluctant favor, I hope you don't mind me saying I was married to this man for 6 years. And I think you should know that he can be extraordinarily patient, Nora said. I was going to say precise to the point of obsession about things most people can't see. That's not Nora's voice was the same temperature it always was, even warm, unhurried. I know them because I have seen it, the patience, the care he has. She looked at Diane with an expression of complete serenity. So, I don't care what you know about him. Raymond said something about getting drinks. He was already moving. Diane stood there. Behind her, 2 of Nora's foundation board members were approaching to greet her. Nora turned to greet the board members with the complete naturalness of someone returning to the water they swim in. She touched my arm as she turned, not a performance. Just there. Diane was standing in the middle of it, having just run out of moves. Diane said my name. Quietly. I looked at her. She extends her hand towards him to hold my arm. I politely decline it. She said, I never stopped loving you, you know. I mean it, just like that. I just nodded my head, and I went to stand beside my wife. But the best part came 2 months later. One evening, Nora came home angry like I had never seen before. She showed me a file on Raymond Harlan. Someone inside the hospital blew the whistle on him. Raymond had a team of 4 people. 1 more doctor, 1 nurse, and 2 admin staff. They were billing the patients for unrelated treatment, suggesting third-party reference, sometimes even smuggling the medicine. He wanted to level up. I don't know what that means. He was already earning enough, had a large home, a luxurious car, and a life. Nora just went scorched earth with them, especially him. She made sure he lost his license and was blacklisted. She also sued him, bringing criminal charges. It could have been a huge scandal tarnishing all the good things she does. Of course, Diane said it was my personal vendetta against her, that I'm trying to destroy her life. But the evidence was overwhelming. She called, sent threatening mail, then sent me her nudes. The desperation. I did what I do best. I went back to my shop and started restoring the broken things. Some repairs do change the repairer. That's just true.